Number 8. Hans Comler. SS General Hans Comler was a top-ranking Nazi official. He oversaw the construction of several concentration camps before being put in charge of the top-secret V-weapons program, which saw the development of the V-1 and V-2 rockets along with other long-range artillery weapons. During the weeks leading up to Germany's surrender in April of 1945, he ordered the destruction of this equipment. Experts have struggled to track Comler's movements throughout Europe during this period. He disappeared sometime in early May after traveling to the German city of Stettin, which is now the Polish city of Szczecin. His body was never found, but witnesses claimed that he died by self-inflicted cyanide poisoning, and the court declared him dead later that year at his wife's urging. Several people stuck to their accounts that Comler was dead even decades later, including a driver who claimed to have seen his corpse firsthand. In letters to Comler's wife that were written in the 1950s, a female former SS member wrote that Comler took his fate into his own hands after vowing that the Americans would not find him alive. The woman also claimed that Comler said that the Americans had made him offers, which he had refused. But in recent years, skeptics have offered a new theory that Comler was snuck out of Europe by American forces and given a new identity in exchange for sharing his knowledge about the V-weapons program. It's entirely plausible that Comler was covertly moved to the US as part of Operation Paperclip, which enabled Nazi scientists who were willing to share top-secret intelligence to avoid consequences for their war crimes and afforded them a fresh start. Some have speculated that Comler lived under the charge of Secret Service agent Donald Richardson, whose sons would later recall their fathers overseeing a Nazi weapon expert. But if that really happened, the truth is still being kept under wraps, and the US government has no apparent plans to come clean about its accused role in helping Comler escape accountability for his crimes. Number 7. Benito Mussolini. Nicknamed El Duce, or the Duke, Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini rose to power nearly 2 decades before World War II began. During the war, he allied himself with Adolf Hitler, believing that Italy and Germany were destined to become Europe's next great rulers. But he was so convinced of Italy's inherent superiority that he was ill-prepared for a war with the Allies, and by 1943, the country was in bad shape. Factory production had ground to a standstill, food shortages were rampant, and morale was at an all-time low. Disgruntled laborers and common folk turned against Mussolini as it became increasingly clear that this grand vision for Italy's future was failing. During the summer of 1943, the Italian king and high command removed Mussolini from power and placed him on house arrest. A few months later, the Nazis rescued him in what became known as Operation Eiche, and Hitler installed Mussolini as the leader of a puppet government in German-occupied northern Italy. By early 1945, the Allies had gained an undeniable upper hand in the region. To avoid falling into Allied hands or being tried as a war criminal in his own country, 61-year-old Mussolini attempted to flee to neutral Switzerland with his 33-year-old mistress, Clara Petacci. They encountered partisan forces at the border and were shot dead. The couple's killers made an example out of the pair by displaying their slain bodies in the streets of Milan, officially bringing the disgraced autocrat's reign to a much-celebrated end. Number 6. Nikolai Chescu. Romanian politician Nikolai Chescu was a lifelong communist who held various government posts before rising to power as the country's head of state in 1967. He assumed the position following the death of the previous communist leader, Jorge Dej. Preferring to make his own decisions free of outside influence, Ceausescu challenged the Soviet Union's rule over Romania and withdrew the country from the Warsaw Pact military alliance. Ceausescu eased up on previous censorship policies and pursued foreign relations with non-communist Western Europe. But any glimmer of hope towards democracy was short-lived, and it wasn't long before the new leader exercised a tight hand over the media and free speech. He refused to tolerate any opposition whatsoever and exported the country's goods at a high rate to repay debts to foreign countries, leaving the Romanian people suffering under food and energy shortages and a lack of medicine. During the 1970s and 80s, Ceausescu tore down a large number of historic buildings in Bucharest and replaced them with socialist-style structures. His heavy-handed rule came to an end on Christmas Day in 1989 when he ordered the military to fire at anti-communist protesters in the city of Timișoara. The rebellion only grew, forcing Ceausescu and his wife to flee in a helicopter. An aide forced the pilot to transport the couple at gunpoint, but the pilot faked an engine failure and the Ceausescus were quickly captured by the military. They were given a brief trial and executed by a firing squad without receiving the customary 10-day period to appeal their fate. Execution team member Doran Marian Sherlan later described the look of fear in Ceausescu's eyes as he realized he was about to die. Knowing he was experiencing his final moments on Earth, he began to cry. It was all over just moments later. Number 5. Muammar Gaddafi. Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi rose to power in 1969 after leading a coup d'etat against King Idris I, whose government had become increasingly unpopular among the general public. Gaddafi ruled under a self-styled combination of Arab nationalism and what he termed as direct popular democracy. But the system was far from democratic behind closed doors, especially when it came to squashing opposition, which was such a high priority that Gaddafi sent hit squads to other countries to kill Libyan dissidents. In addition to political rebellion, alcohol and gambling were strictly outlawed under Gaddafi's system of so-called Islamic socialism. Throughout his more than 40 years of reign, Gaddafi supported leaders and actions in other countries that many believed qualified as terroristic in nature. During the Reagan administration, the U.S. tried unsuccessfully to overthrow Gaddafi over what was later described as an uncompromising support for liberation movements in Palestine and Iran. Gaddafi's relationship with the U.S. worsened during the early 90s when he refused to extradite 2 men who were suspected of bombing a passenger plane that killed 170 Americans. There were also internal attempts to remove Gaddafi from power, including a foiled assassination plot that was intended to take place in 1993. Gaddafi finally lost his grip on power in 2011 as rebels overran Tripoli during the Liberian Civil War. He spent months in hiding with the help of his trusted inner circle, who kept him squirreled away in his hometown of Sirte, one of the last remaining Gaddafist strongholds, until it came under fire by intervening NATO forces. The deposed dictator tried to escape but was found hiding in a roadside drainage pipe by the Libyan military. According to the version of events put forth by Gaddafi's captors, he was accidentally killed in the crossfire between warring military factions. However, a 2012 Human Rights Watch investigation noted that cell phone footage appeared to show the former leader being held in captivity, where he was beaten, dragged, and injured with a bayonet or knife before being fatally shot in the head. Following his death, Gaddafi's body was displayed in a freezer in the city of Misrata for several days. As Libya transitioned toward democracy over the following months, the new Prime Minister Mahmoud Jibril said that he wished Gaddafi had been kept alive so he could be tried for crimes against humanity. Others criticized Gaddafi's death as an assassination and a violation of international law, arguing that the former dictator died in an unacceptable manner despite any wrongdoings he may have committed throughout his reign. Number 4. Adolf Hitler. As the Red Army advanced toward Berlin in early 1945, Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler retreated to the confines of the Führer bunker, his underground bomb shelter near the Chancellery. He remained there for the next 105 days with his partner Eva Braun and several staff members. Hitler's last time venturing outdoors came on April 20th. It was his 56th birthday and 10 days before his death. By then, the Red Army was starting to attack the Chancellery, prompting Hitler to order the remaining German forces to fight back. But deep down, he knew it was a losing battle, and sometime between then and April 30th, he finally accepted that the Allies were going to win the war. Unwilling to face the consequences of surrender, which would have undoubtedly included being put on trial for war crimes, and most likely being executed or spending the rest of his life behind bars, Hitler made one final desperate move to control the ending of his own story. On the night of April 29th, he married Eva Braun as a reward for years of loyal companionship. The following day, the couple said their goodbyes to the staff and retired to the private quarter, where they took their own lives. Per his instructions, the staff took their bodies to the Chancellery Garden and burned them. Number 3. Jorge Ubigo Castaneda. Nicknamed Number 5, or Central America's Napoleon, Guatemalan military general Jorge Ubigo Castaneda rose to power as the only candidate in the 1931 presidential election. At the time, Guatemala was caught in the throes of a Great Depression and facing bankruptcy. During his campaign, Ubigo promised the Guatemalan people a march towards civilization. In reality, he quickly assumed the role of a dictator with complete and total power. Like many of his predecessors, Ubigo gave major concessions to wealthy landowners and the United Fruit Company, and he supported their harsh labor practices, earning him a reputation as one of the most oppressive tyrants Guatemala has ever known. During his totalitarian rule, which lasted for 13 years until 1944, Ubigo had spies and agents infiltrating every faction of everyday life. He militarized everything from the postal service to schools and symphony orchestras and traveled the country for the sake of personally inspecting these institutions. With virtually unchecked power, Ubigo squashed all opposition, including from organized labor, and he used forced labor to carry out his massive public works schemes, which saw the construction of numerous new buildings and the expansion of the country's railroad system. The middle class grew under Ubigo's leadership, but was largely excluded from participating in government. This bred widespread resentment, sparking a democratic revolution which eventually garnered support from disgruntled politicians and military leaders who believed Ubigo's regime was unconstitutional. What later became known as the October Revolution, a small group of soldiers and students attacked the National Palace in 1944. They defeated Ubigo, who went into exile and spent the final 2 years of his life in New Orleans, Louisiana, where he died of lung cancer in 1946. Number 2. Joseph Stalin. Nobody knows for sure how many people died under the ruthless leadership of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, who ruled over the USSR from 1924 until his own death in 1953. The more conservative estimates put the number at around 3 million, while many modern experts speculate that the true count lies somewhere between 15 and 20 million. Stalin's supporters praised him as a champion of socialism and the working class, and he's often still seen in a favorable light in modern-day Russia. But his rule was totalitarian in nature, and countless innocent people suffered and died at the hands of his policies, which resulted in famine, ethnic cleansing, record-high deportations, forced labor, and hundreds of thousands of executions. Anyone who dared speak up against Stalin's regime could count on being brutally punished, executed, or possibly worked to death in one of his gulags. During the early hours of March 1st, 1953, the 73-year-old dictator went to bed after a night out for dinner and a movie with some of his political cronies. When he failed to exit his bedroom the next morning, his guards were worried, but they had been told not to disturb him, so they chose not to check on him. Finally, sometime between 10 and 11 p.m., they became concerned enough to break orders and enter Stalin's bedroom, where they found him alive but incapacitated on the floor, having suffered a major stroke. Stalin clung to life for 4 more days. His daughter, Svetlana, would later recall the look in his eyes right before he took his final breath, describing it as either mad or angry and full of fear of death. He either pointed up towards something or shook his finger at those surrounding him, then abruptly passed away, marking the end of his nearly 30-year reign. Number 1. Francisco Franco. During the Spanish Civil War in the late 1930s, General Francisco Franco led a successful military rebellion which saw the overthrow of the country's democratic republic. The career soldier's nationalist forces achieved victory with the help from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Once in power, Franco assumed the role of a ruthless dictator, marking the beginning of a period of totalitarian rule which lasted from 1939 to 1975. Also known as El Caudillo, or the leader, he imprisoned and executed tens of thousands of people during the early years of his dictatorship. Franco exerted absolute control over Spain by brutally persecuting political dissidents, censoring the media, and suppressing culture and language in the Basque and Catalan. Catholicism was the only religion permitted under his regime. Labor unions were banned, and citizens were at the mercy of an extensive police spy network which intruded every faction of civilian life. There was no such thing as privacy, and even slightly disagreeing with the leadership came with the risk of being imprisoned or executed. As Franco's health declined towards the end of his life during his battle with Parkinson's disease, he stepped largely out of day-to-day politics. His policies became more relaxed, leading to decreased censorship, some free market reforms, and increased strikes and protests against the establishment. Franco fell into a coma in October 1975 and remained on life support for nearly a month until he passed away at the age of 82. Elections for a new leader were held nearly 2 years later, and Spain has remained democratic ever since.
8. Drilling a 10,000-meter hole. In 2023, China embarked on a project to drill a 33,000-foot deep, 10,000-meter borehole, the deepest ever attempted in the country. Their goal is to dig through 10 layers of rock to reach the 145-million-year-old Cretaceous system. News sources have speculated that the hole is being drilled in an attempt to access mineral resources and assess environmental risks relating to volcanoes and earthquakes. The project is being carried out in the oil-rich Tarim Basin in northern Xinjiang by China's National Petroleum Corporation, leading to speculation that the goal is to discover oil and gas reserves. A few months after drilling began on the Tarim Basin borehole, engineers broke ground on a similar project in the Sichuan Basin in southwestern China. The goal for this other project is to drill to a depth of over 34,500 feet, 10,516 meters, which will make it even deeper than the Tarim Basin borehole. Assuming these efforts succeed, both boreholes will qualify as some of the deepest ever drilled. The number 1 position goes to the Kola Super Deep borehole in northwestern Russia, which reached over 36,200 feet, 11,034 meters at its deepest point. Discoveries that were made during the previous drilling efforts have taught scientists a lot about the Earth's geology, and they'll likely learn even more throughout the ongoing projects. 7. Spying on the United States military. In August 2023, U.S. federal authorities announced the arrest of 2 Navy sailors for allegedly spying for China in separate criminal cases. Charged with spying under the Espionage Act, 22-year-old Jin Patrick Wei worked as a machinist mate aboard the amphibious assault ship USS Essex, which moored with the Pacific Fleet in San Diego. His job position gave him access to sensitive national security information, which he's accused of selling to a Chinese intelligence official. During Wei's first court hearing, prosecutors argued that the sailor spied for China at his mother's urging, and if convicted as charged, he could face life in prison. 26-year-old Petty Officer Wenheng Thomas Zhao stands accused of accepting bribes from a Chinese intelligence agent, posing as an economic researcher in exchange for sensitive military information. He allegedly carried out these activities over at least 2 years while working at the naval base Ventura County in Port Hueneme. According to federal authorities, he received 14 bribes totaling nearly $15,000. Both suspects were born in China and are naturalized U.S. citizens. In October 2023, Zhao pleaded guilty to 1 count each of receiving a bribe and conspiring with the Chinese intelligence officer. He's currently awaiting sentencing and faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Wei's case, on the other hand, appears to be ongoing. 6. Allegations of Tibetan cultural genocide. In 1950, China invaded and annexed Tibet, sparking a decades-long ongoing movement to defend human rights and preserve Tibetan culture. Led by the Dalai Lama, the effort is committed to non-violence, but acts of protest against China rule can still get ugly. Since 2009 alone, 159 Tibetan monks and other civilians have lit themselves on fire as a way of demonstrating their disdain toward Chinese occupation. But many of these incidents failed to reach mainstream news due to information blackouts imposed by the Chinese government and the threat of punishment against Tibetans who speak with outsiders. The limited amount of information that reaches the media is often passed on by monks who are living in exile. In October 2023, officials from Tibet's government in exile and other Tibetan leaders met with activists and outside experts to discuss a troubling reality. They're losing the fight to save Tibet from cultural genocide, which isn't committed by killing people en masse like conventional forms of genocide, but through the implementation of policies that are meant to erase a group's long-standing traditions, customs, and beliefs. Recently, China expanded its boarding school system for Tibetan children. Located in China, these institutions currently house an estimated 75% of Tibetan schoolchildren, and are designed to instill Chinese nationalist values while eroding cultural identity. The Chinese government has employed numerous other methods of control as well, including the forced relocation and intensive surveillance of Tibetans. These strategies fall in line with China's goal of eliminating the existence of the Tibetan identity altogether, which is likely to happen if things remain along their current trajectory. 5. Secretive economic struggle. China represents the world's second largest and fastest growing economy, which has grown exponentially in recent decades largely due to rapid industrialization. In 2023, the country became noticeably more secretive about its economic health, leading to speculation that things had taken a downturn. Throughout the year, officials stopped publishing certain data on production, real estate, exports, youth unemployment, and other things that are essential components of China's economic health and in determining its GDP. Many of the reports that were published appeared to show discrepancies with other known data, calling the information's accuracy into question. The sudden secrecy prompted foreign investors to begin selling Chinese stocks and bonds, which can only mean more bad news for an already challenged economy. More recently, a National Bureau of Statistics report from December 2023 revealed that factory production had recently hit its lowest level in 6 months. The information in the report showed that China's manufacturing levels have fallen low enough to qualify as a contracting economy. On New Year's Day in 2024, President Xi Jinping made a rare admission that the country is struggling. During his annual televised New Year's speech, he acknowledged that certain enterprises had a tough time throughout 2023, and that some people are struggling to find work and cover their basic needs. President Xi vowed to consolidate and strengthen the momentum of economic recovery, but many fear that Beijing's traditionally heavy-handed control over economic affairs will impede its return to growth and stability. 4. Military base in Cuba. During the summer of 2023, the Biden administration admitted that China had reactivated a Soviet-era military base in Lord, Cuba. And a few days later, a US intelligence report suggested that Cuba and China were engaging in high-level discussions about the possibility of opening a Chinese military training facility on the island. Located on Cuba's north coast just 93 miles south of Key West, the spy base at Lord operated from 1962 to 2002. It was reactivated by China in 2019 or earlier, along with 3 other intelligence stations. According to Fox News, the bases are likely capable of monitoring internet and cell phone traffic throughout much of the southeastern United States, and they may also be equipped with electronic jamming systems. According to the intelligence report, talks about the prospect of building a military training facility were at an advanced stage but not concluded. There were also ongoing discussions about enhancing the capabilities of the existing spy bases. The Biden administration had previously denied claims about the existence of Chinese spy bases in Cuba, but an administration official who spoke with the New York Times anonymously claimed otherwise. The source said the current efforts were focused on reducing China's influence in the region and other countries of interest by engaging in diplomacy with countries that were being considered as potential hosts for Chinese spy bases. Some politicians have accused the Biden administration of dragging its heels on the issue, despite the fact that China's relationship with Cuba poses the potential for a Chinese military presence less than 100 miles from US soil. The close proximity also means the potential to spy on several American military bases that fall within the reach of the base's capabilities. For now, most officials are remaining tight-lipped on the matter, while more outspoken public figures have called for increased efforts to stop any existing plans for the expansion of China's military presence in Cuba. Do you think China poses a real threat to the US by building a military base in Cuba? Or do you think they have every right to do so if they obtain permission from the country's officials? Let us know what you think down below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. 3. Social credit system. In recent years, China has increasingly fallen under scrutiny for the mass surveillance of its civilians. For years, the Communist Party's been working to implement a moral ranking system for gauging citizens' loyalty and for punishing those who appear to be led astray. First announced in 2014, the so-called social credit system ranks people's trustworthiness based on things like honesty, work ethic, and devotion to family. It also monitors companies using different criteria, like paying taxes on time, maintaining proper licenses, meeting industry requirements, following environmental laws, and doing business with respectable partners. The system bases scores on everyday activities and aspects of an individual's personal life that people in most Western countries would consider a violation of privacy for their government to monitor. Things like cheating on your spouse, buying too many video games, playing loud music, and even jaywalking can reduce someone's ranking. On the flip side though, donating blood, cleaning up the neighborhood, and assisting the elderly can boost a person's score. Those with high ranking scores are put on a red list, which comes with benefits like increased access to credit and expedited approval, tax breaks, job promotions, cheaper public transportation fares, and waived rent deposits. A bad score can land a person on a regional and/or national blacklist and impede a person's ability to travel, access real credit, and even get a job. It can also subject someone to public shaming, slow down their home internet speed, and ban them from hotels. The restrictions imposed on low-ranking individuals can make it incredibly difficult for someone to restore themselves to good standing. Experts say that the social credit system's still in an experimental stage and that it doesn't cover the entire country. There are numerous concerns over whether it will be an effective tool for giving the best opportunities to the most deserving people, or if it will fall in line with the country's disturbing track record of oppression and violating human rights. 2. Secret military bases in the South China Sea. Under China's current president Xi Jinping, the country's military has undergone massive build-up and modernization schemes. While many of these developments and activities are being carried out in secrecy, it's clear that one of China's biggest priorities lies in its claims to the South China Sea. At least 6 other countries have made overlapping ownership claims, but none have asserted their dominance as forcefully as China. In 2014, the Chinese military began turning reefs and sandbars into man-made islands and building heavily fortified military bases on them. Many of these clandestine sites are far from China's shoreline, sparking fears that the sea's use as a major global shipping route could be threatened. There are also concerns that the country will capitalize on the natural resources in the waters surrounding the islands, including fish and oil. These far-flung island bases are equipped with runways, missiles, and weapon systems, giving Beijing expanded control over the contested region. And in early 2022, The Guardian reported that at least 3 of the man-made islands were fully militarized, with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, and fighter jets. In response, the US and its allies have stepped up their military patrols of the area by flying and sailing naval ships past the isolated outposts. China claims that the patrols violated sovereignty, while the countries conducting the patrols maintain that they're enforcing the right of free passage in international waters. None of the parties involved have shown any sign of a willingness to back down, leaving the future of the heavily contested South China Sea unclear as tensions continue inching closer to a boiling point. 1. Atrocities against Ugar Muslims. Around 11 million members of a Muslim ethnic minority group called the Uyghurs live in northwestern Xinjiang. But in recent years, more than 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslims have been arbitrarily detained, which is when a person is held in custody despite no evidence of a crime being committed and/or without due process. The imprisonment campaign against Ugar Muslims began in 2014. Prisoners, many of whom were detained as extremists simply for practicing their religion, were held in what the Chinese government called vocational education and training centers, more commonly referred to by activists and journalists as re-education or internment camps. Anywhere between dozens and several hundred of these facilities were constructed for the specific purpose of housing detainees. In many cases, families were separated, with children being sent to boarding schools that were similarly focused on erasing their cultural identity. Knowledge of exactly what went on at Ugar camps is limited, but the evidence points overwhelmingly toward torture and brutal interrogations being part of the operation of these facilities. In 2019, China claimed that the camps had been closed, but evidence suggests that at least some of them continued to operate until as recently as 2021. Even outside the camps, Uyghurs living in China are subjected to intensive and oppressive surveillance and mistreatment. Allegations include torture, starvation, forced labor, forced sterilization, indoctrination, and the suppression of religion. Starting in 2018, government workers in China began living in Uyghur households to monitor families' activities and their so-called resistance to assimilation. In many cases, male civil servants slept in the same bed with women who didn't want them there, including wives of men who were detained at re-education camps. This was done with the blessing of the government, which ruled that it was appropriate as long as the two parties maintained a 3-foot distance from one another. The disturbing program even had a name: Pair Up and Become Family. China has collected biometric data from millions of Uyghurs who were monitored using facial recognition technology. Surveillance cameras have also been installed anywhere and everywhere in Uyghur communities, along with GPS devices on people's cars. Police have even conducted millions of searches of people's phones. These activities have drawn widespread criticism from other countries and numerous human rights organizations, but China denies committing any human rights abuses in its treatment of Uyghurs. The country claims that its efforts have been strictly focused on counter-terrorism and de-radicalization for the sake of national security. Do you think it's possible that the American government could enforce some type of social credit system in the US in the future? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see ya in the next one. Bye!